Okay, if you take a look at the cover of this tutorial, you'll notice a scene where we have hanging plants sort of over a wall. And that's what I'm going to show you right now. And now if you downloaded the tutorial and you don't have the cover, you can view it on the website to get a better idea of what it is that I'm talking about. But it's a pretty easy technique, and what I want to actually do is first load in sort of that wall object just as sort of a basis of where we're going to be hanging the plants off of. And that'll give us a nice little reference. It doesn't have to be a perfect wall. We're just going to go with a sort of a cube right now and sort of manipulate it. So I'm going to load in that cube, and the first thing I want to do is drop this object onto the ground. And now I'm going to sort of squish that inward and pull that out so we have sort of our wall. I'm also going to make that a little bit shorter. Now as far as the texture on this, it doesn't really matter too much. You could load in any of the presets. In the case of the cover, I actually loaded in a texture from, I believe it was the Random Textures 2 collection that we carry. And that's kind of a neat brick texture that's on there. But we can load in just one of our presets so that you kind of have what we're working with here. So I'm going to double click and double click again on these preview windows. If we can kind of find sort of the material that we're looking for. And I'm going to go up to Tiles and actually select our paved road, which will give us kind of an old looking wall. And click OK. And we'll see how that looks by adjusting our sun. Grab that so we can actually see this side of the wall. So we're going from the correct angle. We'll just move off to the side over here, grab our sun, and kind of focus it in on our wall. And zoom our camera back in to that area. And we'll just do a quick render to kind of see how that wall looks. And even with the preview, I can tell it's about what I want. So we'll just do a quick one there. So we're working with the correct scale. And that looks like it should be alright. So we'll just work with this wall. And what we're going to be doing is actually hanging plants along on this wall. And I might want to make it a little bit thicker while I'm at it. Just grabbing it on the top, taking our constrainer, and kind of pulling that out. Or not so much our constrainer, but our handle. Okay, and I'm going to be selecting a plant now to use for our hanging plant. And there's a variety of plants you can use that will create a good hanging plant. We're going to select just one for the scene. So I'm going to right mouse click on this plant. That's going to bring up our load species. And we can go ahead and grab any of these we want to use. I'm going to grab this one right here, Aurelia, and click OK. And this one has a lot of leaves on it. You can, of course, edit these leaves as much as you want. Create a different type of plant. And kind of go beyond even what just comes with it. But it's a good base starting point. It's a good species for this. So now I'm going to double click on our plant. And we want to make it so it hangs down and it doesn't go straight up. And technically we could just flip the plant over. But there's a much better way of doing it to make it look a little more realistic. So I'm just going to zoom out here so we can see, since we are going to be hanging it, it's actually going to go from this point down. So we need to make sure we're going to be able to see that effect. And basically what we're going to be using is the droop under the trunk and branches editing portion. And we can just select droop. And depending on the amount you droop it, of course get a different type of effect. There's also other things that can determine exactly how this shape is going to look. One thing I do want to do is sort of bring in the length and width on these leaves so we have more of a vine that we can see with some smaller leaves on it. And of course it's not just a matter of creating one large hanging plant set of vines for the whole wall. It's creating one and then sort of editing it, copying it, putting next to it, and that way you get more variation. What we can also do is change our angle, which is pretty much, as you can see, going to create a different effect the more I bring it in. and it can be a bit random as far as the effect it creates, but this gives us a very broad looking vine, very the kind of thing where it kind of grows outward and not so much flat to the wall. So we can edit our angle as much as we want and go ahead and just change this to however it is you want it to look. We could of course change the length of the overall vine, making it tighter, making it longer. Adjust our fall off of our actual main branch right here. So if you wanted sort of coming out of the wall, you can make that a little bit longer. And we could also adjust the gnarling effect that's on it. And that way you get a little more randomness in there. And of course the diameter if you want to, but I'm going to leave that about at the preset, which is around 0. And with that, we'll keep it about right there. And as you can see, when we're hanging these plants, it does become a little difficult to actually scroll down. So you might have to just click and sort of pull that up, because of course the scroll will only let you go so far. And that should be good, so I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And I'm going to pull this up in our front viewport, and then look at our top and see exactly where we're positioned. Now, depending if you're going to have an animation or not, you might not want to animate these leaves. Really depending, as you can see right now, by looking at the top view, we can see this little wind direction arrow, which we can actually use to control the wind. But that pretty much tells us that the wind is on, and depending on what kind of scene you're going to have, you might not want this whole thing sort of blowing around in the wind. Unless you just want leaf fluttering, then you might want to go in and individually adjust that. I'm just going to go ahead and turn off the wind right now. Overall sensitivity, I'm going to set 0, and sensitivity of leaves, I'm going to select 0.5. So this way only our leaves will actually blow in the wind if you do want to create an animation out of this. I'm going to adjust our overall scale of this as well, just because so it matches up to our wall. And we also might want to rotate that so it's sort of facing the right direction. And move our camera in. And basically what we want to do is just sort of copy and paste these across. But there's more we want to do with that, because if we just copy and paste the same sort of plant over and over, it's going to be noticeable that it's just a copy and that it's not. We're going for the illusion that it is one large vine, and this is the easiest way to do it. So what I'm going to do is actually, first I am going to copy and paste, and just kind of move that over. Sort of next to it. But as you can see, our leaves match up perfectly, and we can't exactly just rotate that around because of where the stem is at. So what we want to do is go in and make some changes in our plant editor. And one thing, one easy fix we can actually do for it is actually to create a new plant. So we select new plant, and as you can see, it made it a lot smaller, so you might want to play around with that a little. But it'll give us different variations, and this is a different variation of what we've already created, because it's taking the same settings we have here, but creating a new plant within that species, so it is completely random. And I'm going to click OK, and as you can see, it's a little bit smaller, but our leaves don't match up now. And we can just position that where we want it, and of course edit that, make it, drag it down a little, or we can size it up and kind of position that, and then copy and paste and bring that over. And we just want to keep doing this all the way along the wall, so that we're getting nice variation and full coverage of our hanging plant. Select new plant again, click OK. That one looked like it would be alright. And now we have another different type of plant, and just complete randomness between where the leaves are, which is just perfect for creating a realistic effect. And now, once we actually have this all along the whole wall, we actually want to take care of actually covering this top part where those branches and the end stems are sort of intersecting with our wall. So the easiest way to cover that up is actually create a vertical plant, or a horizontal plant. And I'm actually going to size that wall down a little bit because it might be a little large. And what you'd even do is take these plants and sort of copy and paste them on the other side of the wall, so it's hanging on both sides. But I'm going to just grab one right now. Grab this middle one, copy, and paste. And what I'm going to do is rotate that, so it's facing horizontally, and sort of stick it on the top of the wall. About right there should be good. And that way we're sort of covering up the stems. And of course you can add as many of these as you want. I could take another one, copy and paste it, and pull it over just a little and then down, so it's kind of covering up the beginning part of those stems. And of course with the solid growth technology, we'll create a new plant, get in another type of plant with the same species, and that more variation to it. But I'm going to go ahead and do a quick render of this, just so we can see what it looks like. And I'm going to change our settings to final, render to screen, 640 by 480, which will just give us a little bit bigger of a render. And click render. Alright, we can see that overall it looks pretty nice. We have a nice sort of vining effect we have on our wall. You may also notice the leaves might be a little bit big for this, and but one thing that's sort of distracting from that is sort of the lighting, which is making a lot of the leaves sort of blend together. And the best way to get rid of that is, of course, increase your lighting quality, which is going to be, of course, global illumination or even radiosity, which can, of course, sort of increase the depth in those leaves, and of course make the scene look overall better, because you always want to use at least global ambience. We'll go up to atmospheric editor, go to our lighting knob, and illumination is what I like to use the most, because it's not as render extensive as radiosity, but the illumination looks fantastic. And you want to, I would say, at least use ambience when you're creating a scene for your final renders, just because although it does take a little bit longer to render, it's not as extensive as illumination, but at least you're not sticking with the standard light model, which can be quite unrealistic. Alright, now there's lots of other things we can also do to create hanging plants, and there's different species, of course. I'll just load in another one so we can take a look and see what other types of plants look like as hanging plants. Just right mouse click so we can load in these, and of course with some of these plants it might not look very good, and of course we'll just grab this blossoming cherry tree and click OK. And the effect is not going to be as good. Of course, this is an entirely different type of plant. I mean, this is a tree, it's not sort of a small plant. So I'm just going to zoom in here and we can take a look. I'm going to double click on our tree, and now let's take a look at the drupe. And kind of bring that out, and you can see there's a large jump in there. And of course we can droop our trees out, but it's not really a hanging tree, and we can't really make this into a hanging plant. So you would kind of want to stick with a certain species, and you can see that trees will not create the effect that you're looking for, unless of course you're looking for this sort of effect, which can be kind of neat. And this is also neat too for creating other types of trees, because what you can do is either rotate that around or even reverse the droop like I just did and create that sort of tree right there, which is kind of neat looking. But now you can kind of see how to create some hanging plants, and we've got them applied to our wall. It looks pretty good. If you take a look at the cover image, you can see exactly what I've done with them and create a whole scene focusing on those hanging plants.